Right, so we're ready to start the Daf. Today we are learning Maseches Bava Kama. We are learning Daf Vav, and we are starting on the very top of the page. We had learned in our Mishnah on Daf Beis. Our Mishnah had taught us Arba Avos Nezikin. It taught us that there were four pillars of Nezikin in regards to damages. We said Shor, Bor, Maven, Hever. And then afterwards, it said that there was a tzara shava shebehen. No, chevra, אנחנו באמצע shiur, בבקשה. עכשיו לא באמצע, אנחנו באמצע. So our recorded. So our Gemara says, our Mishnah had said that there were arba avos nezikin, and then the Mishnah then said there's also a tzara shava shebehen. The Mishnah bothered to articulate what it was that was the common denominators. Why? If our Mishnah is exhaustive, then I don't need you to tell me what the common denominators are. So the Mishnah on the top of Vav Amud Aleph calls this out and says, Hatzara Shava Shebehen. Why did our Mishnah say what the common denominators were? It must be that the common denominators of the Arba Avos Nezikin is specifically to teach us the following. Four possible answers. La'asuye mai. What does this come to teach us? Answer number one, Vav Amud Aleph, second line, Amar Abaye, La'asuye Avno sakino umaso. We learned about this earlier. If somebody has a stone or a knife or a package, shehinichan birosh gago v'naflo beruach mitzuya v'hiziko. Let's say that I have an apartment building, and on the top of my apartment building, on the roof, there's a ledge. On the ledge, I put a rock or I put a knife or something, and then with a regular ruach, it falls off. So what Abaye is saying is that the arba avos nezikin are shor, bor, ma, vehever. However, this case was meant to be included by the language of Atzara Shava Shebehen. This case of having something sitting on top of the roof that accidentally falls. It doesn't really fit into the case of Bor because it's moving. It doesn't really fit into the case of Aish because it's not normal. It's an uncommon case. So says the Gemara, what's the situation here? Hechidami. What is the right way to understand this case? If the knife that fell damaged while it was falling. So let's just imagine, let's say you have an awning and the knife is falling and it pierces the awning. That's while it's coming down. Then hainu eish, that's the same type of damage as eish. That can't be a ribui in our Mishnah. That is eish. It's the same exact thing. It's a moving damager. Just like fire moves and damages, so too this thing falls out. That's eish. This is not, what? We haven't learned about grama yet, but that's a great question in Lamdus. But over here, we're trying to figure out what the avos nezikin are, right? So let's remove grama from the question for now, because we first need the basic yisodos. Great question. It's the right question. But we'll learn about that later in this Masechta, I believe. Then the Gemara says, Hainu Eish. So says the Gemara, Maishna Eish. Why would this case be any different than Eish? Why would Abaye's answer be any different than Eish? What do we know about Eish? We know there's fire, but there's also a secondary factor, which is wind. And when that Eish travels, you who lit the fire are responsible. Haninami, the case of Abaye too, of Avno Sakino Maso that fell off the roof. Haninami, koach achar me'uraben. You put it on the roof. There was a ruach mitzuya that fell, that made them fall. So says the Gemara, what Abaye must mean is that it can't be that the knife is falling and that's when the damage happened, but rather velabasar denaichi. Maybe the damage that we're talking about, where something fell off the roof, is after it already landed. So let's say, for example, the knife falls off the roof, it falls, and then it's blade side up, and your cow steps on it, and you cut the hoof, you damage the animal. So maybe that's what we're talking about. Says the Gemara, Ida afkirinhu, if this item was a mufgar, the knife, as we're using as the example that fell from the roof with a regular wind, bein the Rab, bein the Shmuel, hainu bor, everyone would agree in such a case that that's considered to be a bor. That's a bor b'shur sarabim. It's not moving anymore. It's stationary on the ground. And Maishna bor shekain tchilas asiyaso lenezek umamon chashmiros alecha. A bor was made to trap things. It was made to be a pit in the ground. Pasha, you're going to be responsible for that. Haninami, here too, even if you want to assume that the sakin and the evan and the maso, that they fell off the roof, even if you want to say that, okay, the case is a little different, but Lamais is no different than bor. Ella, it must be, says the Gemara, and we're still within Abaye here. Abaye says, what do we learn from Atzara Shava Shebehen is talking about a knife or some item that falls off of a roof. It must be Ella Delo Afkirinhu, where we were not mafkirid. It's my item that I left on the roof. It fell to the ground, and it's still my item. And Lishmuel, this doesn't work. Lishmuel Da'amar Kula Mi Boro Lamadnu, that anything that's like a bor, Hainu bor, any item that you leave out. If you leave a bicycle in the middle of the road and somebody who's not really paying attention trips over it, your fault. So says the Gemara, Le'olam, it must be da'afkarin hu v'lo damu lebor. It must be that yes, we were mafkir it, but it's not exactly like bor. How is it in between bor and something that's hefker? Ma lebor shekain ein koach acher me'urabo. A bor has no secondary forces acting on it. I mean, it has gravity, but we're not calling gravity a secondary force. There's a pit, and you're walking, and you fall in. Really not a person. Let's say something, an animal falls in, right? So that's not koach achram urabo. That's not wind pushing it. So it's not really bor. What's happening here? It fell to the ground from the roof, the knife, the rock, and now it's just sitting there. There's no koach achram urabo. Says the Gemara, that's not true. Tomar bahani, these things that fell off the roof, shekoach acher yes mu'urabahen. Says the Gemara, well, I guess if you're saying that, then eish tochiach, we should have put that in the category of eish, because eish is where things are moving. So if you're going to say that now that it's resting on the ground, that it's a bor, fine, then it's a bor. If you're saying that, well, it's different than a bor because it's moving, because it used to move, it fell, then call that eish. Says the Gemara, bor tochiach v'chazar hadin. So this is how Abaye answers. Let's review the question again. Our Mishnah taught us arba avos nezikin, and then our Mishnah told us that tzara shava shebehen, that there's a common denominator. Why did our Mishnah have to say the common denominators must be to include another case? Abaye, which is answer number 1 of 4, says it's to teach us about a case where a rock or a knife or a package was placed on the edge of the roof. It falls beruach matsuya, and then somebody gets damage from it. That is the case that is considered to be added to our Mishnah with the language of atzara shava shebehen. That is answer number 1. And a third of the way down on Vava Mid Aleph, we're going to learn answer number 2. Rava Amar la'asuye, a different case. No, not something falling off of a roof, but rather bor hamisgalgel beragle adamu veragle behema. It's a bor, it's a pit that gets moved by the feet of a person or by the feet of an ant. What does that mean? A pit that gets moved. Do you remember Tom and Jerry from back in the day, where he would slide? That's not possible. A bor is in the ground. It doesn't mean that. It means an item that's equivalent to a bor, something damaging. Right? You leave a bear trap out. That's a bor, Bershus Harabim. But it gets kicked by someone. It gets moved a couple of feet by an animal, by a person, and now it's in a different spot than it was. Is that bor or is that eish? We don't know which one. So this is what Rava wants to recommend. So the Gemara asks, Hey Chidami, what's the case of this movable bor in Rishus Harabim? Ida afkirinhu, if the owner was mafkir and says, I no longer own this trap, whatever the case may be, bein the Rab, bein the Shmuel, hainu bor, everyone would agree that that's a bor. It's just, okay, you left something there, now it's a bor, you're chayiv. And ma'ishna bor shekein tchilas asiyas al-nazg u'shmiras alecha, and just like a pit that is dug into the ground, this bear trap that you left above ground is also a bor. You're obligated. Haninami, obligated. You're obligated to. So that can't be what it is.
There's differences of payment or what? Because
right now we're saying there's no difference. Right now we're saying that's our kasha right now on Rava. So the Gemara says no. Where does Rava's case actually need to be added? Where is it not already included in our Mishnah? What's Rava coming to teach us? So Rava says the case is really de lo afkirinu, where I have this trap with all of its sharp teeth, and I have it in the Rishus Harabim, and somebody kicked it and moved it, and I was not mafkir it. I still own it. So says the Gemara, according to Shmuel, l'Shmuel da amar kula mibor lamanu, according to Shmuel, who says that anytime I leave something that could be causing damage in public, that's considered a bor. So by him, hainu bor, for sure that's not what Rava meant, because that case was included in bor. It must be, therefore, that at least according to Shmuel, la'olam da'afkirinhu, it must be that really the owner of this bear trap was mafkir the bear trap, but velo dami labor, there's a difference between the bear trap and the bor. What's the difference? Ma labor shekain ma'asav garmulo, tom rabahani she'ein ma'asav garmulo. By the bor, when the bor was dug, it was never moved, so that's just never moved. But by the bear trap, it was moved. There was an impact on the item. It's now 10 feet over to the left, no longer similar to bor. So says the Gemara, but shor yochiach, if that's true, then a shor can walk. Why is that any different than the bor than this movable bor? So then we should say that it falls into the category of shor. No. A shor can walk on its own. This bear trap can't move on its own. Doesn't really fit into shor. Oh, so a bor yochiach. Okay, well, it falls somewhere in between bor and shor. And that is how Rava answers our question. So Rava says, the chiddush of our Mishnah, what's being included when we say atzara shava shebehen is that we have this case of a movable danger that you leave outside. My front lawn is filled with movable bores. That's exactly what it is. I've had neighbors complain about it. Yeah, you got your hose out there. I might trip on it. You've got half of one of those, just a half of a scooter, right? It's broken. The other half is somewhere else in the house. Those are bores. B'rshus harabim. If somebody gets hurt, that's my fault. My kid kicked it 10 feet. That's what Rav is coming to be mechadesh. That even if it gets moved, you're still chayiv, and that it's as if it's mine. 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the way down. Here's answer number 3 of what our Mishnah comes to include: things that fall in between the lines, the gray areas of halacha. Says the Gemara, our Mishnah, when it adds in the tzara shava shebehen, is coming to teach us that which the Brisa taught. What did the Brisa teach? Kol elu sha'amru posken bibosein v'garfen ma'arosein. There are those that say that at certain times a year, you can open up your pipes and you can open up the pits. Namely, these are drain pits of where people would go to the bathroom or dirty water. These kind of like, what are those tanks called? Septic tanks, right? The old version of a septic tank. Some homes still have them. Probably not so much fun. So thank God we have regular plumbing. So what the Gemara is saying over here is, back in the day, they would open up these pipes one type a year to drain out their gross parts of their properties. And they were either in pipes or they were in pits. So the Brisa, where is this Brisa? I feel like we've learned it before. No, maybe not. It says it's here. It says, when was this done? Bimos hachama ein lehem reshus. In the summer months, you're not allowed to empty out your septic tanks because it's beautiful out. You're going to sully the perfectly dry road with sewage water. That's not right. Rather, bimos hagshamim yesh lehem reshus. But during the winter months, it's already disgusting out. We had a disgusting day already last week. It snowed. It was nasty. We were debating if we should put on our thermals and our boots. It was gross already. On those days, you can open the septic tanks, no problem. And afal pisha virishus. And even during the winter months, when you have permission to open these pits, says the Gemara, im hiziku, if when I release that sewage water, it causes damage, chayovin l'shalem, I'm still obligated to pay. So what does Rav Ada bar Ava try to recommend? That this scenario of damage is included in our Mishnah by tzara shava shebehen, to say that if a person causes damage, even when they have permission to open up their sewage pits, if it causes damage, you're chayiv, and that falls into the category of an av nezikin by inclusion of tzara shava shebehen. Okay, says the Gemara, heichi dami. What are the circumstances? 10 lines from the bottom. If the damage is caused when you open up the dam of whatever your sewage pit is, and while it's flowing, it causes damage. Let's say you had laundry hanging there, and the height of the flow of the sewage was high enough, it ruined your clothes. That's kochohu. That's no different than me literally pouring it on your clothes. That's kocho. If I pull the stopper and everything opens and I ruin your stuff, that's me doing work. That's kocho. That's direct. For sure you're going to be chayiv. That's Adam in our Mishnah. And elabasar denayich, if you want to say that, no, it only got things dirty after it settled, so you opened it, all the sewage lets out, and then as it settles, then it causes damage to your field, whatever the details are. So ibasar denayich, if it's after, then hechidami, what is that? If you are mafkirit, then bein the rab, bein the shmuel, hainu bor, everyone agrees that it's a pit. No different than a bore that's already the av nezik, and we don't need you, Rav Ada bar Ava, to include this in our Mishnah. In the case of poskim bibosein, where it doesn't matter, it's already included in bore. And therefore, it must be, says the Gemara, just like a bore, where by definition it can cause damage, and you're obligated in its shmira. Haninami. This case of opening the sewage pits, guess what? You're also going to be held accountable. Says the Gemara, Haninami, this case of opening a pit. So therefore, as of now, we don't understand Rav Ada bar Ava. So the Gemara pivots and says as follows: 4 lines from the bottom of Vav, Amid Aleph, the Gemara says, Ella, it must be the lo afkirinhu, that when I open up the sewage pit of my property, I'm not being mafkirit, and it must be that if that's the case, we have another problem. It doesn't matter. If you're not mafkirit, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's still a bore. La'olam, it must be the afkirinhu. Really, it must be that I don't want that. That's not helpful to me. Why am I going to keep that? So I am going to be mafkir, that which I let out of the sewage pits. But v'lo dami labor. There is something about this case that's dissimilar to a bore, and therefore Rav Ada bar Ava needed to include it. What is it? Malabor shekain shelo birshus, tomar bahani de birshus. You're not allowed to dig a pit in public. But here the Chachamim gave you the out to open that dam. So therefore, you're functioning birshus here. A bore is not allowed. Here you function birshus, so perhaps it's not the same. And therefore, Rav Ada bar Ava said it needed to be included. Says the Gemara, no, but if it's birshus, that if you're allowed to open those pits, then that's the same thing as a shore, because a shore is allowed to walk around. Shore yochiach. Perhaps this should be under the bucket of the av of shore, no problem. No, malakut shore shekain darko leilechud lahazik. It's not true, because here it's the way of a shore to walk around and damage things. It's not the way of sewage to walk around. It's inanimate. So therefore, the Gemara says bor tochiach, back and forth v'chazar hadin. And therefore, what do we see? We see that through chazar hadin, Rav Ada bar Ava teaches us a gray area of halacha. Again, our Mishnah taught us arba avos nezikin, and then it taught us the word tzara shava shavan to teach us the common denominators. That I had to come teach us something. According to Rav Ada bar Ava, this is answer number 3. It's coming to teach us about this gray area of when the Chachamim allow us to open our sewage pits in public, that if it causes damage, even birashus, you as the Baal are going to be chayiv. That's one of the additional cases to our Mishnah. Answer number 4. And this is going to be the last of our 4 answers. None of these seem to conflict with one another. And I don't know, I didn't look into the Rishonim, what each of these people say about each other. I don't know. Answers 1, 2, and 3 do not conflict. So we had, whatever, I'm not going to go back now, but if you look at it, they don't, there's no steers between them. Maybe all of them are true. Maybe all of them are brought in as the tzara shava shabahen. They could be this and this and this. It may not be this or this or this. Different operators between the answers. Answer number 4. Second line of Vav Amud Beis. Ravina Amar, no. Why is it that our Mishnah had to say the word tzara shava? Why did the Mishnah have to articulate what the common denominators were? If the list is exhaustive, I don't need the common denominators. It must be that there's something else to include. La'asuye mai. It doesn't say that, sorry. La'asuye haditnan. To teach us the following din. Hakosel v'ha'ilan. If you have in your property a wall or a tree, shenaflu l'reshus harabim v'hiziku, and it fell from your property into Reshus Harabim, the Hiziku, and cause damage, Pater mi l'shalem, you are exempt under those circumstances. It wasn't your intention. It was in private property. You didn't really do anything wrong. It fell on its own. Now, let's say that the Chachamim told this guy, listen, the kosel is shaky. You got to fix it. The tree is dead. I can see there's no leaves. You know, we had this with what's it called? The ash borer, whatever it's called. This bug that was killing a lot of trees. A lot of trees died around here. Okay, they started injecting them. That's how crazy we got. We started injecting trees with vaccines to make sure that it's fascinating. Okay, another time we'll talk about trees. Or no, we're never going to talk about trees. So anyways, the Mishnah over here adds in, if I work for the Department of Trees and I walk by your house, what? Forestry. What? There's another name for it by us. Forest. You know that forest. No, you know forestry is not the forest tree. It's spelled differently. Okay, good. Baruch Hashem. I'm just making sure that you didn't think it was a forest tree.
No.
Chasdei Hashem. I'm thrilled.
Your father's been giving me lessons.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's terrifying, actually. Mark with chemistry information on his hands.
I don't think forestry is part of chemistry.
No, it just ends in a tree. Yeah.
Are they?
Everything is made of chemicals. You know what? I don't want to go down this rabbit hole of what chemicals he is made of. So we're just going to move on. Yes. Yeah. I hope we can't hear you from the back on the recording. So says the Gemara, 4 lines down, the Mishnah continues that if they gave him if they gave him a time to take this down, and v'naflu b'socha azman, I'm giving you 30 days, says Bezdin, you have 30 days to fix the wall to take down the tree, and during that time, and it fell down, if during the 30-day warning it fell, no problem, because you're still within your window of fixing. But la'achar hazman, if the 30 days, using the 30 days is not what it says, just whatever the amount of days they give you, if the time lapses and you didn't fix it, chayiv, you're held accountable. This, says Ravina, is the added case in our Mishnah, is to teach us that if you're outside, sometimes here in Chicago, if your lawn is too long, they give you a ticket. You got to do it by day X. Okay, fine. Similar idea. We're telling you your tree has to come down. When the time passes, if it falls at that point, the Chachamim hold you accountable. Chayiv. That's what Ravina wants to add to our Mishnah. So the Gemara analyzes Ravina's answer. Hechidami, 7 lines down or so. Ida Afkirin, who's same as before. If he was mafkir those properties, Bein l'Rab, Bein l'Shmuel, Hainu Bor, of course he'd be chayiv in this case because he left a bor, B'Rshus Harabim. They're not allowed to do that. And Maishna bor dehiziku matsui, dehazeko matsui, where we know that there's a bor B'Rshus Harabim that can cause damage. Shmiras alecha haninami. This case too of the tree and wall that you have in your property, hezek and matsui, Shmiras alecha pasha, that you'd be chayiv. It says the Gemara, Ida lo afkirinhu, and if you weren't going to be mafkirit, the Shmuel damar kulam mibor lamadu hainu bor, no matter what, it's still going to be a bor according to Shmuel. Laolam, it must therefore be that what is the case of Ravina? It must be the afkirinhu. It must be where the owner said that I no longer want to own this, but velo dami labor, but there still is a difference between our case of the shaky wall and the dead tree, between this and a bor. What's the difference between the shaky tree and the shaky wall and a bor? Says the Gemara, 5th of the way down, the Gemara says, as we said before. When I dug that pit out there, I should not have dug that pit out there. It was made to hurt people. Tomar Bahani, you can't say that about a wall or a tree. It's just not the reason that they were built. Tomar Bahani, says the Gemara, fine, I understand. You're right that you did nothing wrong by building a wall or by growing a tree. But then if that's true, shor yochiach, it should fall under the category of shor and still not be a chiddush in our Mishnah. Then Ravina should be wrong. Says the Gemara, no, shor is different than our broken wall and dead tree. Because 3rd of the way down, a shor can walk. Trees are not supposed to walk, and walls are not supposed to fall down. So therefore, they're not comparable. Therefore, bor tochiach v'chazer adin v'chule. So that's the Gemara's 4th answer. All of the answers that we have. We started at the top of the previous page with an answer from Abaye about the knife that falls down. Then we moved on to Rava, who spoke about the bear trap that was kicked 10 feet. And then we had answer number 3, Rav Bar Abba, about opening up the swamps, opening up the pits, the septic tanks. And answer number 4 was this case of the wall that falls down after the period of time they gave you to fix it. These are the 4 cases that the Gemara says, either individually or as a group, are included in our Mishnah, because the Mishnah did something that it didn't need to do, which is that it gave us the common denominators of our 4 avos in the Mishnah. Had the list been exhausted, had it been an exhaustive list, I wouldn't have needed the common denominators. So if you're teaching me the common denominators, there must be a reason. What's the reason? 1, 2, 3, and 4 were our answers. Okay, then the Gemara picks up, I never would have caught this, right? This is why we have to learn Torah, because we miss things all the time, totally blind. The Gemara says, quoting our Mishnah, Kishehizik Chav Hamazik. So if you look back on Daf Beis at the Mishnah, that's exactly what it says over here. It says 2 lines before the end of the Mishnah, Ucheshehizik, if any of these things, the 4 avos, or any of the things that are in the category of Tzad HaShavah, when they cause damage, Chav Hamazik. What's weird about this? What does the word Chav mean? Now we know that the root is from the word chayev, but it's a weird word. So the Gemara says and asks on this and says, I don't understand. The Gemara says, chav hamazik, kishehizik chav hamazik, it should be chayev hamazik. Speak like Shas. Chayev hamazik mi boile. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, Haitana Yerushalmihu. This Yid who wrote this Tana was a Tana who lived in Yerushalayim. And they spoke much more concisely. Titani lishna kilila. That's why, for example, if you see Rabbi Elazar in Yerushalmi, it'll be Reb Lazar, Reb Lazer. That's where the nickname of Reb Lazer comes from. It's from the Yerushalmi. Even other names, Rav Yuda instead of Yehuda. We see a lot of short names in Yerushalmi. I've barely learned Yerushalmi, but the sugyas, even in the short sugyas that I've seen and been, what? I promise you I am not an expert. You know what else I'm not an expert on? Talmud Bavli. So don't worry about it. We're in the same boat right now. So there are just a lot of shortenings that happen. It's a much more, it's its own kind of language, but the few dapim over the years that I've learned in sugyas that were related, you'll always see names that are a little bit more terse, and it's a little different. It's different, has a different tom to it. What Masechta was that was like that? Shkalim. Shkalim had a little bit of a flavor like that also. Yeah.
It's full-fledged Yerushalmi.
I know, but it doesn't, I don't know, yeah. Yeah, it's true. It didn't feel as jarring to me as some like sugyas that I've seen in other places, but it is, yes. Okay. Says the Gemara, 3rd of the way down. L'shalim tashlume nezek. Okay. As I've said before, this is where we put on the real thinking caps. Now, today is easy, but this is very important to get this clear. because our Mishnah speaks about something that seems to be very basic. Our Mishnah says that when you're paying Tashlume Nezek, you have to pay b'meitav haaretz. You have to pay with the best of your land. Who is the your? Let's say that I damage your land. The Mishnah says pay with the best of your land. Is that me paying from the best of my land, even if my damage to you is less? Or is that me looking at what your best land is and then matching that to what I have? This is a big machlokes tanaim. Are we bidin nizak shaimina? Do we measure according to the one who is damaged? Or bidin mazik shaimina? Do we measure according to me? Who's the yardstick of meitav sadehu that our Mishnah speaks about, of meitav haaretz? So let's get into this sugya, a third of the way down at the two dots on Vavam and Beis. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis teach us in a brisa. We actually saw this in Gittin. So for those of you who recall, the boo doesn't belong to Gittin. Other Masechtas deserve boos, but not. Shkalim was hard, but I was okay because it was more mathematical, like all the coin. There's no. Yeah, I can go on now. Yeah, Keenan. Yeah. Says the Gemara, quoting a brisa, quoting a pasuk, Meitav Sadehu, the best of his fields, Meitav Karmo, and the best of his vineyards, Yishalim, that's how he should pay. Listen to the language of Rabbi Shmuel. Meitav Sadehu shel nizak, Meitav Karmo shel nizak, diva Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel says we're measuring against the one who's damaged. I hurt you, I damaged your property, but the nizak, I have to see what happened to you, and I reflect my payment according to your nizak. You are the nizak to your meitav, whatever is best. Rabbi Kiva argues in Omer, lo ba'akasav elo legabos lenizakin min ha'idis, that guy, the nizak, should collect from my idis, from my best. Then that's a v'kal v'chomer lehektish. We do not know what these words mean yet. The Gemara doesn't present yet, and we're not going to talk about it today. We'll learn about these words at a later point. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel, I don't understand your shita, Rabbi Shmuel. Ochal shmeina, mishalim shmeina. I understand if what I did to you in damage was I ate your field, which has a quality of 7 out of 10, and I have a field that's a 7 out of 10, that I pay you back. Mistaber. Of course that makes sense. Easy peasy. But ochal klusha, if I ruined a bad field of yours, mishalim shmeina, I'm going to pay you back. It doesn't even make sense. How am I measuring from your better field if what I damaged was your lesser field? Doesn't make any sense. What must the case be? My animal ate a piece, a line within a patch of your fields. And I don't know, and I don't know what my animal ate, and neither do you. We have no idea. So says the Gemara, then dimishalem shmeina. Then I have to pay according to what would have been your finest patch. Says Rava, that's ridiculous. If there's an unknown of what I damaged, why do I have to overpay? How do I know that I'm paying the right thing? Omar Rava, halfway down, had I known that what I damaged in your field was of low quality, lo mishalem ela krusha. Everyone agrees that I would have matched what I owed you. Your krusha is a 4 out of 10. My krusha is a 4 out of 10. My animal ate your krusha field, your bad field. Here's my krusha bad, no problem. Easy, that's good. But says Rava, hashta delo yad inan. Now that I don't know what I did, if my animal damaged ikrusha achal ishmena achal, mishalem shmeina, I'm obligated to pay the higher standard of an unknown. Says the Gemara, hamotzi mechavero alavaraya. I damaged your field. I say, I'm so sorry, I owe you money. What did my animal consume? You're like, I don't know if it was the 4 out of 10 property or the 8 out of 10.
You just go out and look.
Don't know. We don't know. The food's gone. We don't know what was planted there. We don't know the quality of the planting. We have no idea. It's an assumption of the Gemara. The guy, I damaged your field. You're like, look, Phil, thanks for apologizing. I'm happy to take a check from you. You owe me money, but I just don't know what it was. So Rabbi Shmuel wanted to say, "B'denizak shaiminan." We measure from the high. Why are we measuring from the highest? Why? If I owe you money, hamotzi, you want to take money out of my pocket? Olavaraya, go prove it to me. But don't tell me that I have to pay with the higher standard because you don't know. That's not my fault. I don't know what the answer is, says Rava. But don't tell me I have to pay to a standard that's high when your knowledge is 0. That's not fair. Says the Gemara, you're right. Ela Amar Rabacha Bar Yaakov Hacha b'mai askinan. What is it that we are dealing with over here? Kigon shahaysa idis din nizak keziburis din mazik. We're talking about a case where the best field of the nizak was the worst field of the mazik. That means let's talk about a case where the nizak, where you are idis din nizak, where you are a more poor person. Your best field is the same as my worst field. Okay, I'm a spitz guy. I have a lot of nice fields. You're a pauper. Your fields are trash, right? Your best field is a 4 out of 10. My worst field is a 4 out of 10. So it says the Gemara, Baha Pligi, what's the machlokas? 3/4 of the way down. Rabbi Shmuel Savar, that these two fields, when we have the idis of the nizak and the zibers of the mazik, Savar b'de nizak shaiminon. Rabbi Kiva Savar b'de mazik shaiminon. We look at the nizak, we look at your field and we pay what your field is worth. They're going to be somewhat similar, but they actually won't price out the same because my nizak is actually not going to sell the same as yours because within my properties, it's a lower property. Rabbi Akiva Savar b'de mazik shaiminon. So says the Gemara, and we're going to only learn a few more lines and then we're going to stop. My time of Rabbi Shmuel. Why does Rabbi Shmuel say that we follow the nizak? If I damage you, why do we follow you and not me? Says the Gemara, because we have Gzer Shava. Ne'emar sadeh lamata. V'ne'emar sadeh lamala. We have Gzer Shava. Ma sadeh ha'amur lamala de nizak. Of sadeh ha'amur lamata de nizak. We can take a look at the psukim on the side. The pasuk says over here, Ki yaver ish sadeh ocherem v'shilach es be'iro v'yer b'stei acher. Okay, so there's a Gzer Shava from the Reisha to the Seifa of the word sadeh. Rabbi Akiva, what does he say? Meitav sadehu meitav karmo yishalem teha'ich tekameshalem. Beautiful drasha. He says, who's the one paying? The pasuk says he should pay. So who do we measure? Rabbi Akiva is like such a pashtan in this case. He's like, the pasuk says you should pay from your best. So who are we talking about? You. Who's the you? The payer. So therefore it should be from the best. Very, very simple. So we're going to stop right here at the words of Rabbi Shmuel, about 10, 12 lines from the bottom. Tomorrow morning, Emir Hashem, I'll give a shiur at 7:10, right after the early Shachris. We'll be done, Emir Hashem, by the 7:45 Shachris. And then tomorrow's Thursday? That's Thursday. I'll record and post Friday. Reb David's going to be giving shiur on Shabbos at 2:50. Yeah, that's right, on Shabbos at 2:50, and then I'm back on Sunday. Okay, good. Wishing you all a beautiful night.